This is Robin from the Ocean. We just released our new album, Holocene. I believe it's number 9 or number 10 last Friday. And yeah, it has a bit of a different emphasis than the previous one. It's more electronic, still heavy. And we're currently preparing for bringing the show out on the road. We haven't seen each other for the past couple of weeks because we had a very intense 6 months tour in 2022 up until February this year. Pretty much, we went on a long headline run, then went to the States with Catatonia, then to South America, then did Europe with Carnival. And so right now we're all taking a strategic break, which is very important in order to feel it again when we get back together end of June for summer festivals. And then hopefully Australia early 2024.
Beautiful, mate. Sounds like you've been busy boy indeed.
Indeed, yeah. 150 shows in a year.
Well done, mate. Congratulations. Better than the alternative, though, I suppose. Not playing any.
Yeah, exactly. It's been too long, so we're all quite stoked to load our schedules as full as possible.
I bet, mate. So, as you mentioned, the Ocean released your 10th album, Holocene, back on May 19th last week. So, I know it hasn't been out long, mate, but how's the early reception been? Are people digging it?
It's been quite overwhelming, honestly. Yeah. There's nothing but Holocene in our in in the feed for a week now. And I think people are very enthusiastic about the record. So it's really great. We weren't sure, but we're never sure because each one of our records takes a bit of a different direction, while staying true to the essence, I hope. But we like to challenge ourselves and our listeners and not just repeat the same formula each and every time again. So you never really know how people will react, so it's always interesting. But this one has been exceptionally well. And we can't wait to actually play it live.
Oh, so you mentioned the electronic element before, mate. So can you tell us a bit more about the album from a musical point of view and what you're going for with it?
Well, to explain the musical, the musical direction, what happened here, I have to tell you how the record came about, basically. So all these tracks were initially synth ideas by our keyboard player Peter, who wrote them during mid-lockdown in 2020 and sent them to me. And in the beginning, we weren't even sure if this was going to be for an Ocean record or for something else. But what he sent me, I really liked, and I wanted to add guitars to it and drums. And so I did my things with it. And then by the end of that process, we had a record and we were like, oh, this very much sounds like an Ocean record. So it wasn't really planned for, it just happened. When you have too much time at your hands, we start writing music, and this is the result of that. And then we realized that it connected actually very well with a previous record, Phanerozoic 2, which already went in that direction towards the second half of the record, where the tracks were getting more spheric and more electronic in a way. So it felt like it seamlessly connected with that, and that's why we decided to add another chapter to this paleontology-inspired album series that we started with Precambrian in 2007, and then we did Phanerozoic 1 and Phanerozoic 2 in 2018 and 2020, and that was supposed to be the end of it. But since we had this extra record, we were like, all right, let's add the Holocene chapter. The Holocene is the last era in the Phanerozoic Aeon, and it's also the last track on the Phanerozoic 2 record. So it's kind of like diving a little deeper into that track now with a whole record. That's what we've done. And here we are.
Very cool. Now, I think it's important to note here, we are sort of focused on the electronic element a little bit, but that's just like an accentuation of the music. You've still got your heaviness, and you've still got the Ocean sound underneath it, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the heavy parts hit harder when you contrast them, or when you have a build up towards them. And I think that's what this record is doing maybe better than previous records, that we take a lot of time to get to those heavy moments. So when they kick in, they're super crushing. And I think you really have to listen to the record in one piece, ideally, or at least the first 4 tracks, because when that first really heavy part in Atlantic, the 4th track, comes in, you have to prepare yourself for that by listening to the first 3 tracks, and that's also what made it really difficult to pick singles, because none of the 4 singles we picked is representative of the album as a whole. They're all quite different, and they all only give you a brief glimpse on this record, and you really need to sit down and listen to those first 4 tracks in that consecutive order, I think, to get the idea, essentially. So it very much is an album rather than just a random collection of songs. And if you're happy to invest 50 minutes of your time into it, hopefully you'll be rewarded by really listening to it from the beginning to the end.
I'd actually like to talk about that a little bit more, mate. Like you mentioned, like that song and how you had to listen to all 3 tracks before it to get the full effect of it. So how difficult does that make it for you choosing your single? Because that one was one of the singles. So like it sort of, you wouldn't really want to put it out there knowing people aren't going to get the full effect of it, but you've got to put something out.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, that was a big challenge, but in the end we embraced that, and we were just like, okay, we're gonna mess with people a bit, you know. So the first single we chose is like the opening track. It's not telling you what this record is all about, really, you know. But we realized, like any other single we would have chosen, is like it was the same case basically. So I think the 4 singles we chose, they kind of give you an idea, but also like not the full picture. So I don't know, what does that tell you about the record? It's very diverse. Every track has its own identity, clearly, but they all have that same oceanic vibe to it, I think, you know, that core substance that is there. It's just different perspectives on the same thing, essentially. But I think it's a very diverse and very, very dynamic record, and a lot less predictable also than most of our previous efforts, I think. So like you never really know where it takes you, you know. Like for example, there's like the 6th track, Unconformities, starts with a female guest vocalist, Karen Park, and it's kind of like a very catchy tune for the first half of it, but then it turns into the heaviest track of the record. And it's you know, like, so when you start listening to the beginning of it, which is very verse chorus, kind of like song-y, you wouldn't expect where the song ends. And I think that is true also for the record as a whole.
So we sort of touched on this, but Holocene follows the critically acclaimed double album. Here's the first one for me. Phanerozoic. How'd I go?
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty good. So did the success of those albums put any extra pressure on you going into Holocene? Like you're sort of having to live up to that expectation, I guess?
No, not really. I honestly, like, we don't really care what people expect or think. Like we do what we need to do, and ideally people will like it. If they don't, it's okay, you know. But yeah, we don't think much about that. Like I'm also always in a bit of a bubble, like when it comes to where we stand, or like how people perceive our records and our songs. Like one example, we released Phanerozoic 2 in the fall of 2020 during mid-lockdown, so we didn't have a chance to tour when that record came out. And when we finally started touring with that material last year, we toured the US with Leprous in March, and that was the first time we played those tracks live. And then we headlined in Europe in like May, June. We realized that everybody knew the lyrics to those tracks, you know. And so it was very different, because normally, like when you play a first tour with a new album, you're kind of insecure because you haven't really played those tracks live, and at the same time you feel like the crowd wants to hear the older songs because they're more familiar with the older material. So it's this kind of like delicate balance, you know, where it's difficult to get like a really good response to the new tracks, you know. And that's always the challenge when you have a new record out. And that was very different here, because like people really had a chance to digest that record, and you know, and we weren't aware, like, and once we started playing Jurassic Cretaceous for the first time, I think it was in Lyon in France, and everybody was singing the lyrics and losing their shit. We were like, holy fuck, like, you know, we didn't expect that. But obviously the album had been out for 2 years, you know. It had like I don't know, like 8 million plays on Spotify or something like that, so people knew the material. We were just not aware. So like we're usually like not paying too much attention to that and to what people think, and let ourselves be surprised. And that's yeah, that's a good approach, I think.
Now you touched on this a little bit before too, mate, but I have absolutely no idea what you were talking about. But Subatlantic, like you say, like it closes the album, and there's a piece in the press release about that, which I say I don't understand. So I'll get you to explain it. Like it says, it's become clear that this is the closing of not just a record, but a series of paleontology-inspired albums that the band started 16 years ago with their seminal Precambrian LP in 2007. Now, I haven't got a clue what any of that means. Am I stupid, or is it intricate?
No, you're probably just not familiar with our catalog. That's all. We released an album in 2007 titled Precambrian, which is the first chapter in Earth history, pretty much,
Right.
like from the very inception until the the first 4.5 billion years. Um, and that was back then just like a one-off record, but then we kind of went back to it in 2018 and made Phanerozoic 1 and Phanerozoic 2, which is the consecutive eon after the Precambrian. And then, like I said, Holocene is like the last era in the Phanerozoic eon. So it is a series of albums. It wasn't meant to be in the beginning. It's just something that happened. I've always had a fascination for Earth history and geology, and I always felt it was like a very adequate visualization of our music. You know, that's how I initially found it. Like I was listening to those Precambrian songs and I was thinking of prehistoric landscapes and volcanic eruptions and like streams of lava, and like that's what made it to the album artwork, and then it became a concept for a whole series of records basically. So it's coming from that kind of visual angle. But yeah, it's I don't know, like we weren't planning to continue on this forever, and this is definitely the last album on that as you just quoted, paleontology-inspired album series. It's done now. Phanerozoic 2 was already supposed to be the last one, and then Holocene just kind of happened, you know, because the songs were there and we felt they connected well with the last track on Phanerozoic 2, so we decided to add another chapter to it. But no, it's beaten dead. There's going to be something new for the next record, I promise.
Well, so it's like, are you going to start another whole conceptual series, or are you just going to start doing standalone albums now?
I don't know. Like I always like to have a kind of like a frame or like a, you know, like a red thread that goes through a record when I write lyrics, rather than just like starting, you know, randomly from scratch with every song. So I think probably every ocean record we're ever going to make is going to be some sort of a conceptual record, you know, with a topic and a theme. But like I said, it's time for something new now, and I don't want to plan the next 5 records already ahead of me. I also want to be able to respond to, you know, what I care about, rather than just like sign up for something that in the end I might get bored with at one point, you know. So we'll see where it takes us from here. I have a bit of an idea what I want to do with the next record, but it's still in its very early stages. So yeah, too early to talk about it really.
No worries at all. And we touched on this before too, man, but your sound, especially on this record, like it's highly atmospheric and almost cinematic at times. Like, how hard is it conveying those feelings through music?
It just happens naturally, man.
Yeah.
It's I don't know, like we're sitting down, like I mean, I guess the question is like what inspires you. It can be anything from like noise of everyday life, from like personal experiences, from other music or other art exhibitions you're watching or whatever, and then eventually you sit down with your instrument and something comes out and you don't know why or where it's coming from in that moment. It's a bit of this like black box. You have like input, you know, like all these experiences and sounds and music and art going in, and then you have your output, which is like what you do with it. And what happens in this black box, I have no fucking clue, and I don't want to know. You know, it's like it's magic, and it's a mystery, and it's supposed to be that. If I was able to analyze that and like, you know, then work with it in like a logical mathematical way, I don't think the outcome would be the same. I think it would be probably feel more constructed, you know, rather than intuitive. So I think it's good that way. So like, and yeah, I guess that's the same for all of us. So we don't really think about what we want to achieve with a song or something, you know, like we don't sit down and think like, oh, I want to make this super atmospheric track that is going to feel like this and that. No, we have an idea, and the idea leads to another idea, and it eventually becomes a song. And then by the end of it, you look at the song, you're like, oh, this is what this has become, you know. And it's usually not what you initially had in mind, and that's great, you know. That's the beauty of inspiration and like the kind of like the purposeful randomness of creation, I think.
Yeah, very cool. And you mentioned earlier too, that, like how you've sort of changed a bit musically from album to album. Like, how much more musical growth, I guess, do you think the Ocean have got left in them?
I think a lot has happened in the last couple of years. Ever since Peter joined the band. Initially, he like our synth guy, who was like the main originator of the ideas on this record. And that's the first time. Every other Ocean record, and there's 10 of them in the past, basically started with me writing songs, you know, from guitar and drums. And this is the first one where it was not like that, where it was basically Peter's initial ideas that I then did something with. So it's different in that regard from every other Ocean record. And that's also because Peter has found his place in the band, and that took him some time. When he joined for Phanerozoic, he was mostly just like coloring, like playing along on the mooks and like you know, doubling the guitars. So his synths were quite important for the guitar tone of the record, actually, but you didn't hear them as synths. They were just like kind of like merged into the guitar sound, you know. And now this record, he's come a long way, you know. Like this record is full of like ideas that were initially incepted on the synths, and they're like very, you know, very charismatic and very more like lead themes, you know, and sounds and production aspects and all of that. So yeah, so a lot has happened, and that's also because of the people that have been in the band now for a while. You know, in the past we used to have a lot of different people in and out of the band all the time, and now we've had a steady lineup for the past 7 or almost 10 years. And we know each other really well, and everybody has found their place. We know each other very well as musicians and as people, you know, and that opens up new doors, clearly, you know, in terms of songwriting as well, in terms of musical development. And I guess it's just it's just getting older, really, you know.
I hate admitting that, but it's true, isn't it? All right, Robin. Well, thanks very much for your time tonight, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. The album Holocene is out now, and I had to listen to it before the interview, mate. And it's very well crafted album, very well put together, mate. I reckon it's one of those ones. Repeat listens will bring out more and more layers to it. So I'm going to give it a couple more.
Yeah, it's a slow grower for sure.
Beautiful, mate. All right. Well, thanks for your time again, and hopefully we'll see you out here in Australia in the near future.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, and see you over there.